When you find the activity, occupation, service that is natural, that purposeful for you, it will be feeding your energy in a natural way, like a flow. So it's not about, well, I need to rest and then I need to do work. You will actually enjoy the activity for the sake of activity, and then you get paid as well because you produce value. But that's the ideal way to find yourself at mid-career, where you can use all the previous baggage to leverage all that, but also unleash the gifts you have as a human being. What are you called to do? Are you called to create? Are you called to help people? Are you called to heal? Are you called to, I don't know, perform or whatever? Because another thing is, a lot of energy is actually wasted on either blocking emotions or suppressing things and hiding the part of yourself, right? A lot of energy is actually consumed by not being your whole self.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. I am your host, Josh Abbandonato, and we are in a special location today, which I'll talk about in a second, so just stay tuned. We have a very special guest today, 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐤. Thank you so much for joining us today. Where are you calling from right now?
Hi, Josh. I'm calling you from Berlin in Germany, and thank you for having me on your show. Looking forward to
You're
it.
very welcome. And guess what? You are the first Germany guest we've had. So
Wow,
welcome.
that's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have it. I love it. We have several other guests coming from different countries here recently, and but we do not have anybody from Germany. So I'm so
Excellent.
happy to have you here. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So 𝐤𝐤 is an award-winning career coach. She specifically works with professional men dealing with, what some people would call midlife crisis or midlife shift, I think is something that you've mentioned before, to help stop being stuck, stagnant, burning out. If you are a midlife man like me, which I'm not sure what the age is on that. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second. But I am a midlife man. And maybe some would say that I've been going through a crisis. I started a podcast in my midlife, started a new company, started a coaching company myself as well in my midlife. And I know that one of the things that you're really passionate about is helping men that are burning out in just soul-sucking careers, right? Like maybe they've been doing it for a long time and they're just tired of it and they just want to pivot to something that maybe is more missional. Even if they failed a lot. And I really loved that you said this in your bio, talking about making an impact and an income that they want and deserve, even if they failed a bunch of times before. Because guess what? That's the whole reason this podcast started, was to talk about failures real time and talk about struggles real time. So I'm so happy to have you here. And
Thank you.
everybody stay tuned. So she calls it a do what you love 5-step formula. And I'm just going to tease you with that. So you have to listen to the rest of the episode or watch the rest of the episode. So we'll get to that here pretty soon. So 𝐤𝐤, how about we just start with a little bit about your background? One of the things that maybe hits my mind first as a woman coaching men is, how did you get to a place where you thought, yeah, I really want to coach men? And maybe the follow-up question to that is, how do you feel like what sort of experience do you have to speak to coaching men as a woman?
Yeah, good question, Josh. And thanks very much, by the way, for introducing me. I really enjoyed listening to your introduction. It sounded great. Yeah.
Good.
Well, I have to say, it wasn't like I decided I'm going to be a coach for men now. It's not how it happened. And by the way, that's how most of us get on our path. It's not like we sit there, we think about it, we decide, and then we get there. And at least not at midlife, not at mid-career. So for me, it was an evolution process, so to say. So I've been coaching. I had my corporate career, then I pivoted into coaching, and I was an executive coach for over a decade. And I worked with executives, and most of them were mid-career. When I say mid-career or midlife, I kind of mean 35, 55 years of age. So it's roughly this 20
35
years.
to 55. Got it.
35
Okay.
roughly. Well, that usually it means that a person has already done 15, 20 years of work. Yeah. And there's another 20 years to go. All right.
Well,
So then
I'm 40 and I've been in my other career for 18 years, so I'm right in the middle of that.
you're
So,
smack in the
yes,
middle. Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Absolutely. And basically, it's like the person has this huge backpack, right? So full of all the experiences and the good ones and the successes and the wins and the failures and the regrets and disappointments and losses. Yes, all of it, this whole backpack. And so I work as executive coach, with basically helping executives, corporate people, get better leaders, be more successful, be more effective in their job. So, and I've been doing that for a long time. And then at some point, I wanted to relaunch myself online and do more of my own thing, having my own business, coaching business, rather than working through business schools as I used to. And at that point, I sought help, advice from strategists and coaches, business coaches, to help me, prioritize who are my clients. So where would be my sweet spot? And so we basically just looked at my portfolio so far for the last decade, and turned out that majority, like 90% of my clients were men. And
Hmm.
they were in this 35, 55 years range. And so basically the advice I consistently got, why don't you specialize on this group? Because they seem like you know them well, what their problems are, what they're asking for, what they're looking for, and so specialize there. So, and to be honest, just at first, that was a bit weird for me again.
Right, right,
You know,
right. Like
being,
I'm a woman. I'm not in this category. I don't, but that's
yeah.
where your clients were. So that, yeah.
Exactly. And so the first, I did not actually accept the advice. I was like, no, this is weird. And how am I supposed to say, like, guys, I'm not working with women anymore? And it's just weird. But then actually, it was another process when I looked and I actually did listen, and I was working with both men and women in this mid-career shift niche. When I noticed something that when I was working on my program with the group of my clients, I noticed that when I worked with them individually, they would say one thing, but when I would see them in the group, they actually changed the way they spoke. And
Mm.
I consulted that also with a lot of coaches and
Wait,
psychologists.
so real quick, so pause there for a second. Are you saying that men individually spoke differently than men in a group, or men individually spoke different than men and women in a group?
That's the second thing, the men and women in the group. So basically, that the men would say one thing to me individually in our coaching session, and then when they were in the group, where there were women clients as well, not many, but I usually have like 20%, 10% of female clients. Suddenly, men would not even admit things they would
Fascinating,
share with
fascinating.
me.
So
Yeah, and
why do you think that is? What was it
something
about
else,
the female influence that
something
had
else.
them?
Yeah, and there was something else. They also, and we also, by the way, were more kind of filtered, I would say this way. And there was something else I noticed, that men seem to almost like delegate the vulnerability to women. I actually noticed that even before I was running my own program. I was working at business school, INSEAD Business School, which is a very sort of big business school in Europe. Now I think it's also growing in the US. And basically, I had groups of MBA. There was a number one MBA program in the world, by the way, where I worked. So it was really great experience. Very ambitious people, like super, super achievers. And I had usually groups of MBA. And they were like people in this 30 to 35. So they were usually younger than my old clientele. But I did notice it there, that I would have individual sessions with them, especially guys. They would, it was a very challenging program. They would tell me about their vulnerabilities, about the challenges. But then in the group, for instance, a woman would say that she would felt challenged, that she's not coping, that she's maybe overwhelmed. And the guys would be, oh, we're so sorry for you. And they would not
Uh,
mention that they actually 2 days ago crying in a session because of overwhelm. And
so
I
let's,
was,
yeah, can I pause you on that
yeah,
for a second,
yeah,
because this is something that is actually really passionate to my heart right now. So I'm going to bring up where I am first of all, because this
okay.
even actually relates to where I am. So yesterday was so I'll be brief with this, but one thing that I have found in my life that we're not going to talk about today on today's podcast, but maybe we'll talk about another time, is that there are certain dates for me that can be very sensitive, let's just say. So yesterday was one of those dates. Yesterday would have celebrated my wedding anniversary if I was still married.
Mhm.
And yesterday I would have celebrated my anniversary with my girlfriend if I would have still been with her. It was the exact
Mhm.
same day. And my body and soul feels those dates sometimes. So what I actually decided to do yesterday is I actually decided to try to nurture myself, and I did a staycation in the town that I'm 30 minutes away from. And you are now seeing the beautiful fake books and my little friend over here, because I thought it'd be fun just to record here. Why do I bring that up? The reason that I bring that up is that yesterday, one of my primary things to do while dealing with some of the grief that I had from these lost relationships, both of these lost relationships in the same day, is that I needed to nurture myself, but I also needed to take care of myself. And also I wanted to be with male friends specifically. And I hung out with a female friend as well, but I specifically did not want any romantic interests or any other things like that, because I knew that I needed to deal with the process of grief that I needed to deal with yesterday. And just the mere presence of a woman that I might be romantically intrigued or attracted to or whatever would actually keep me from that vulnerability. So I'm only bringing that up because of what you just said, where, I don't know how it is in Germany. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, but I believe very strongly, and I've been talking about this a lot on social media and everything else, which again, for listeners, viewers, if you don't follow us on social media, please do. We have a lot of really great stuff: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, wherever you want to go. It's all in the link below. So one of the things I've been talking about a lot on social media recently is how, specifically in our culture, and I want to hear what you think about Germany, but specifically in our culture, there is, and everyone I've talked to agrees with this, by the way, there is idea that if a woman is vulnerable, or she needs support, or she needs therapy, or she needs help, or she wants to be a part of a victim support group, or whatever it is, that seems to be our culture is very open-armed about that. Like, that's fantastic. I'm so glad you're working on yourself. That's what's best for you, etc. And then when a man does it, the response that we get, at least in this culture, is like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, get yourself together,
which is so
man.
fascinating. Is it like that? Yeah, exactly. Like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, as my grandpa used to say. Get your shit together. Is it like that in Germany at all, or is that just here?
I would say yes. In Europe, we also, I would say in Germany, yes, probably men have more officially permission to be vulnerable, and I don't know, maybe accumulate or accommodate some of their, more feminine side, so to say. But in reality, it still would be like that sort of conversation. What's wrong? What's wrong? Yeah. And actually, it will probably come from both men and women. Right. So, but I also want to make, I also want to make a specific note that all my life as a coach, I've never like specialized in one nationality, like Germany, for instance. I've always worked internationally, also in business school. It was like so internationally, you cannot get more international like that than that. And here as well. And there was that feature of dynamics between male and female dynamics was actually quite universal across nation. I literally worked US, Europe, Asia, Middle East. Even now, I have clients from all
That's been consistent. That's been consistent with what I was just saying.
It's been consistent, absolutely consistent. That, let's say, men would allow themselves to be more vulnerable when they were in their own space, but once they were in the group and there were females present, they felt, and it's not like they thought about it. It was automatic, because for that particular example I shared, where a guy was crying in my session 2 days ago, and then he heard in the group a participant was crying, saying she was overwhelmed. And instead of saying, for instance, like, me too, right? That's what we women would do. Me too, girl. I was just like upset 2 days ago. It was like, oh, I'm so sorry for you. Not a word about his own struggles. And afterwards, I could not betray him, because we have confidentiality.
Of course, you're not gonna say that.
No,
but,
absolutely, I set him up. So afterwards, I asked him, Paul, what happened there? What was that?
What did he say?
He was not aware. He was not aware. He just said he felt had to be strong for her. He felt
it was so ingrained in him that he needed to have kind of this masculine strength, which in his mind also meant masking of emotion, that he needed to be there for her, that he didn't even realize he did it.
He didn't analyze. When I brought it to him, it was a big aha moment. I said, Paul, I saw two different guys. There was one guy I mean, and that, by the way, he was very strong. He was vulnerable. He was overwhelmed, but he was dealing with it. And of course, and both were very valuable. But he was not aware that with a female, he subconsciously was programmed to abandon his vulnerable self, right, and be strong for her,
Wow.
right? So
Interesting.
he was shocked when I shared it with him. Said, "Listen, this is two different people." So it was a journey for him of awareness that actually, and he had no idea what would happen if he would also say, "Hey, me too." It was to him felt almost like the world will fall apart. Like he publicly acknowledged
Yeah. No,
that he was
and I definitely
vulnerable.
relate to that. I've been there before. I'm curious from your perspective, is there any aspect of that that's healthy? So let me pose my question better. As men, I think one of the roles, and again, gender roles are very confusing these days, but I think as men, one of the roles that historically, if you read any of the literature on it, that one of our roles is to protect, right? So I think that there's probably an element of that that maybe is healthy because he wants to help protect, right? It's take wars, right? During wars, it's historically it's been the man's job to protect the women and children. Now, I'm not saying women aren't supposed to be in the army and all this sort of stuff. Don't use my I mean, fine, use my words and misquote me if you want, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is part of a man's role, just ingrained, I think, is to protect. So it seems like a portion of this might be healthy, but the non-vulnerability or not even opening up about what you're struggling with clearly isn't healthy. So can you help me? What
Yeah.
would you say to the listener? Like, what part of that is healthy? What part's not healthy from your
Well,
experience?
honestly, I'm not a doctor, and overall, I don't think we should put the labels. It's bad. It's good, it's bad. We just observing behaviors, and what happened is just that men and women behave differently in mixed groups. They took different roles compared to when they were on their own in purely like women only group, men only group. That's basically the observation I had, and not just me. I worked with other coaches, and we actually compared notes, and we all saw that the mixed groups, that's what's happened. That often the vulnerability, or let's say traditionally feminine features, which associated with the feminine, right? Because not all women are 100% feminine. Women have feminine and masculine, men have masculine and feminine, right? But what we associate with being female and male, that in groups, people tend to be more kind of reverse to those stereotypical role, whereas in the individual or when they were in a group of men, men also assumed roles, right? It was also different, but there was less of that. Well, I have to like be there, protect a woman, and I have to play like this warrior role archetype, what you just said, right? Of the
Did
protector,
it
the
feel,
strong
yeah,
one.
yeah. Did it feel like when the men were in a men's only group, maybe they could let their guard down a little bit about that whole protection thing?
Yes and no. I also saw that, yeah, could be less, they could be relaxed about protection and vulnerability. There would be other areas, like for instance, competitiveness,
Of course. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Challenge. Let's go. Let's go,
challenge,
guys. Let's
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
Also, sometimes it would be hard to, let's say, be vulnerable. But I noticed that men would be more inclined to share vulnerability if there were no women around, because I don't know, for whatever reason, they felt maybe that the women that have the right to be vulnerable, not men. That's one aspect that was kind of very obvious. The second thing I would also say, Josh, which is maybe a bit more controversial, but I noticed that one of the emotion, I mean, let's put it this way: mid-career and midlife time, it's a lot of men, especially of this very strong masculine warrior type, experience the crisis. And a lot of this crisis, without going into detail, has to do with maybe some unprocessed emotions, among other things, and unprocessed emotion. And what I found, some two unprocessed emotions, and actually you mentioned already one of them, that I find men most of the time are struggling with and being derailed by are, first of all, grief. That's what you mentioned. Because somehow men are not very good at processing grief, right? And
Yeah,
second
agreed.
emotion, which is kind of connected, is anger. But if you dealt with grief before, if you know anything about grief, then we know the change curve, the emotional change curve. This is emotional curve that is involved in grieving. When a person is grieving, there is an emotional curve that people need to go through. It's inevitable. It's like having a flu, right? And having a fever, and then having all of the symptoms. It's the same. And one of the emotions on that curve
Is what?
anger.
Right.
About the loss, about what happened, about the change, of something being done to us, about how we were, a person was removed or situation was removed from us, that we lost
Right.
something, that we've been victimized somehow. It's anger. And what I also noticed, and not just I compared notes with other coaches, and it happens a lot, but men have a taboo around expressing anger, especially around women. Especially
Because
late,
why do you think that is?
well, I guess it's because anger has a lot of that side to it, right? I mean, and especially lately, I mean, because there's a lot of talk about the toxic masculinity and what you
That's
have.
it. Literally, my mind was exactly going there, Anna. Is
Yeah.
that like there's so much talk right now, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, and I talk about it on social media all the time. And it's a whole other topic about whether I even believe in toxic masculinity or not. If you guys want to know, listeners, viewers, if you haven't seen some of the recent episodes, go watch them again because we talk a lot about this. But whether toxic masculinity exists or not, we're as men, I mean, I can only speak for myself and the men that I speak to, are so, what's the word I'm looking for? Just so nervous, so like walking on eggshells about this,
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
feel like if we ever show any sort of anger, that all of a sudden we're going to be labeled as this toxic, masculine,
Yeah.
evil, terrible person.
Yeah. Yeah. This is true. Yeah. This is the reality of where we live in, right? And
Thank you for saying that.
yeah.
By the way, thank you for saying that as a woman. Thank you for saying that's a reality we live in, because most, a lot of women are the ones that are screaming this all the time. So I appreciate
Yeah.
you as a woman saying that this is actually happening. Thank you. That's very affirming for me and for our listeners, for sure.
You're welcome. And this is also maybe part of the reason why sometimes men need a woman to acknowledge the taboo, right? Because, Josh, I would even go one step further, since we're already in the taboo territory, that a lot of the hidden and suppressed taboo anger men carry is actually anger at women, right? It could be expressed in different ways, and men need to express it, but they can't because it's inappropriate most of the time, right? So a lot of men actually share with me in confidence how they had examples of misdirected anger when they would be inappropriately angry at some woman, completely, irrelevant, but of course they would carry anger a lot. But this anger is so scary to them is that they absolutely feel they cannot express it. They cannot express it at all, especially if there's like other women present and they, for God's sake, God forbid, they can offend them or insult them or whatever, right? So it's really good intentions in a way. Because honestly, Josh, majority of men are good people, right? So it's the same as women. I believe in that we are good people, majority of us. Yes, do we have some toxic elements? Yes. But most of people have good intentions. Most men have intentions to protect, to provide, to share their gifts with the world, make the world a better place. I literally see thousands of men through my work and they all want that. But in order to get to that, sometimes they need to deal with emotional barriers or blocks. And some of it has to do with anger. And when there is a taboo on expressing it, then it just doesn't get expressed. We don't even talk about it. We kind of, taboo is a taboo, right? Something we just omit. And what happens then, that creates a stuckness. It creates a stuckness. So the person cannot let go. So the grief and anger process actually kind of repeats itself. The guy gets stuck in there and just repeats the pattern, so to say. There was actually, I don't know if it was in the US, but there was a TV series I watched recently. I think it's called Afterlife or something like that. This is about a guy who lost his wife and how he basically becomes, I'm sorry to say, asshole in a way. He just becomes horrible to people. And at first it just doesn't make sense. People, of course, pity him, and it's set in the UK. Dance around him and forgive him, but actually he is unbearable. And it doesn't make sense at some level. But when I watched it, I told my husband, listen, that's exactly what I see. The guys, I mean, of course, majority of guys don't behave like that, but that's the way they express grief. They need the anger to get out,
That is a hurt man.
But they can't. But they can't. And so they just hide it and that gets them stuck. Anyway, so these are the two things:
Yeah.
being
So first of
vulnerable
all,
and
yeah,
being
I'm
angry.
gonna make a reference in the show notes. It's called Afterlife, and it's with 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐬. I've seen it. I think it's I think it's a fantastic show, and I think it's also to your point. I don't think I'd really resonated with this before, but to your point, it shows grieving man that lost the love of his life, and he's a very, very hurt, insecure man who frankly just doesn't want to be alive anymore. He wants to kill himself. He just
Yeah,
doesn't think anything's worth living for, and he takes it out on everybody else. And he's not, you watch the show and you're like, after a while, you first watch it and you're like, what an asshole, because he is a
exactly. Yeah,
total
yeah,
asshole
yeah,
all
yeah,
the time to everybody. And then
yeah,
after a while you watch it and then the character starts developing, you start realizing like this is just a really wounded, hurt man
yeah.
that just
Absolutely.
lost love and doesn't know how to process these things. He doesn't know how to
Exactly.
process the
No,
anger, the grief,
no, no.
etc. So he just does it by being an asshole.
Absolutely. That exactly that. Yeah, I'm glad you watched it. Yeah, because I thought that's exactly it. And then basically after anger, man needs to go into sadness and a bit of depression, not in a clinical sense, but in kind of a sense of acceptance that something is lost and never will be regained again. And that actually is even harder for a lot of men because they were taught not to show be vulnerable, not to be depressed, go do something, be active, go play outside. All the kind of thing. He cannot be left alone. And so, in a way, we prefer them go back into anger because at least anger, manly, it is manly.
Yeah,
So,
right, for sure.
but in
Yeah,
other
yeah.
times, yeah,
If like me yelling and expressing my anger as a man is more manly than me crying, right? Or me being depressed or
exactly.
whatever. And
Kind of,
we've
yeah.
so I did a episode pretty early on in the podcast about grief and the stages of grief. And, as I'm sure you're aware, you can ping pong between the stages. It's not like it's a circle or a straight line. You could go from anger to denial to depression, whatever. It's all over the board. And I've definitely experienced that in my life. And, one of the things that we've talked about on here recently too is that a lot of the times I think that grief is specifically for men. Maybe this is true for women as well, but I've noticed it specifically for men. A lot of the times grief is thought of as, yeah, you can have grief if somebody dies, but otherwise grief is not appropriate. Like, your business deal fell
Mm.
through. So what? Get your shit together and go do another
Yeah,
one.
yeah, 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 yeah.
You broke up with your girlfriend. That's okay. There's other
Yeah.
women out there. Just go
No,
fucking figure it out, right? And
no, no, no,
we aren't allowed the space to just let the emotions come
no,
when they come. And this is a
no.
journey that I've personally been on. One of the things I always talk about myself on this podcast because I feel like I can be vulnerable, then maybe other men can be vulnerable. And frankly, too, I'm just going to make a plug real quick. And sorry to do this with you on the podcast, but I'm just really excited about it. So we just recently made a private Facebook group for men that listen to this podcast to actually create some space where men in
Mm,
a group setting can actually be vulnerable and open up about
mm,
these things.
mm, mhm.
And I'm really excited for that. We just actually created it here very recently. So, by the time this recording comes out, it's probably been out for a couple months now, but it's very recent right now. And I'm really excited about that because the conversations that can happen, like you said, when it's only men in the room are just different than when there's
Yeah,
women there. And
yeah.
I'll just share a personal example, from my own story that happened within the last couple of weeks. I was at a concert with some friends and, I've been going through this grief process, broke up with my girlfriend as of the time of this recording about a month ago. And we were together for 2 years and it was the best relationship I ever had and everything else. And I was at a concert with some friends and having a great time. They're some of my favorite people in the world. And then just saw this woman dancing with her boyfriend in front of me and it triggered me about her. And I just had to go to the bathroom and just started bawling my eyes out
Mm,
and came unexpected in my past. If I would have had any inclination of a feeling like that, I would have shoved it down and said, no, you will not
mm,
be sad. You will not grieve. This is not what a man would do.
mm.
Right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
that was my training as well. My training is
yeah.
men don't cry. Like I've never seen my dad cry, I don't think. Or any of the men. Like I come from half of my bloodline is Italian, so my whole dad's side is all Italian. So they're these macho Italian dudes, right? Like they don't cry. I don't think I've seen anyone in my family cry ever. So that's what I learned how to
Mm,
do. You just
mm,
move past your emotion. You don't
no,
deal with it.
no.
And then, but I'm curious from your perspective as a coach, especially as we start talking about like men having this transition midlife and everything, what do you see? Because what I see is a lot of men who haven't been able or haven't expressed that emotion or that grief or whatever they've needed to express for 20, 30, 40, 50 years of their life. And then all of a sudden something happens, usually in midlife, I think, to like trigger men to either do it or they'll never do it in their entire
Yeah,
life, right?
yeah,
But sometimes something triggers. Maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's a big career change, maybe it's, something big like that, a bankruptcy, whatever, where it maybe just triggers to where they're like, oh, okay, now, like for me, it was my divorce, where I was like, oh, okay, now maybe I need to actually deal with my emotions. But I'm just curious, from your coaching experience with these men, what do you have you seen that? And then
mm,
also when men do get to that point, what do they do with that? Like there might be people watching or listening to this right now that are like kind of feeling like, oh man, like I'm going through a hard time or there's
mm,
struggles, etc., and I don't know what to do about it. What
yeah,
would you say to them?
yeah,
Maybe this goes into your 5-step formula. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, I
you tell
hear
me.
you. Answer your question with a bit of an additional question. Listen, we came here to talk about mid-career change, and for like 30 minutes, we're talking about emotions, right? What's the connection? What's the connection and loss? Well, because what you talk about is that, and there's a man, and let's talk about men because I work with men, and you work, your group is men, are men, right? So basically, we're talking about a human being, a man living, and he cannot express emotions because that's a very important thing about humans. If you have a taboo around expressing one particular emotion because it's not appropriate, it's not manly, like sadness, like grief, like tears, like anger, or is it too manly? It's toxic manly anger. What it means that we cannot as humans experience some emotions, healthy, good emotions, and not experience others bad. If we feel that emotions are dangerous, we are not allowed, we will be punished, we will be rejected, we will stop being men or whatever, then we psychologically switch off the emotions altogether, right? It's a bit like fuses in the house. So, when the system cannot deal with whatever too much, I'm not an electrician, but too much current or something, boom, the
That's okay. Yeah, I'm not either.
fuses, fuses get out, right? And then no electricity in the house. So these
Hmm.
men live basically with switched off fuses,
Mm,
no emotions in the system.
mm.
Because you can either have it all,
So wait,
protection.
hold on. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying because it's a really interesting point. So you're
Yeah,
saying that like excuse me, sorry, if I don't know how to express like let's say anger in an appropriate way, then it's like an electronic fuse to where maybe I don't know how to express all the other emotions as well.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
an
Including love,
interesting. Huh.
because anger and love are actually very, very close. They're very close to passion. So okay, in a simple word, you would say, let's just say emotions associated with the heart. So if I feel there's emotion that could just blast my heart apart. I mean, maybe it's grief, maybe it's anger. I just can't express. It's too big for me. I
Right.
can't possibly. Again, it's
It's
like
overwhelming me.
the
It's overwhelming me.
system
Right.
will be overwhelmed, so the fuses go off. So I just switch off that part of me, the heart. But then I will not feel anything. I will not feel love. I will not feel pleasure to the full extent. Yeah, I will not feel, I don't know, enchantment. I will not feel happiness. I will not feel. It will always be sort of subdued, kind of emotionally. I will go, a lot of men, when you ask them, how do you feel about it? They will be like, I think, and they will go with the think, which is in the head. They will go with analysis of what's happening. No, no, no. That's how you feel. How I feel. It's okay. That's the favorite. It's normal. I feel like it's okay. It's okay. So I'm fine, right? But because this feeling switched off, and unless you deal with the blockage, and the blockage is something, as we already said, that was perceived before as impossible to process, right? Maybe it was too much grief, maybe the loss was too much. Again, maybe it was too much anger, and it was inappropriate to express that anger that way. It was blocked. But then the whole carb stops. And we talk about career, doing what you love, because a lot of men tell me that they really don't know what they love. They're working in a job because someone again convinced them very long time ago, 20 years ago, that that's what men do. And that's the good job for you. And you have your good
Right.
brain for, I don't know,
Right.
finance or law
Right.
or whatever. So they went there, started doing it. They were successful. They made good money, but their heart is not in it. At mid-career, what happens is basically you realize that it's only part of you that's doing the work and living, and there's a part of you that's like switched off. It's split
Absolutely.
off.
Yep.
Carl Jung, a psychologist, called it the shadow, right? It's somehow pushed out of the light. No one should see it. Okay, some men are lucky enough that they find a hobby or they find a group of friends or something where they can express those rejected parts of themselves and somehow keep them alive. But a lot of men, they just kind of, the last time they remember themselves being like emotional, super happy, I asked them that question and they're like 45 and they're like, I can't remember. What are you talking
Right.
about?
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
oh,
That's
oh,
so
maybe,
sad.
maybe I was 12. I was like, oh my God. And
That's
actually,
so
it's true.
sad. That's so sad. That's so sad. And just to like be empathetic to the listeners for a second, like if you're a man like that, that's not what life's about, right? I mean, we are on this earth, I believe, for very specific missions and purposes for each and every one of us. And it's a beautiful world with beautiful people, and we're all very different, and we all have different passions and everything else. I very much relate to what you're saying as far as, I got into finance as an example because I was good at it and I was good at math and I was good at, and what I ended up finding through that, honestly, it was that what my real passion was coaching people, because that's all finance is. Finance isn't really like, hey, which financial product do you buy? It's how do you coach somebody through the mindset and the mentality of finance? And that's what I love about the finance side of my job, which is why the other side of my job is coaching men with other limiting mindsets, beliefs, etc. Just like I'm sure it is with you, and you have a much more illustrious, wow, why can't I say that word? Illustrious career in that than I do, because
Sure,
you've been doing
sure.
that even longer, but I've
Mm,
definitely related it to on
right,
the other side of it.
right.
And, I guess this is just like, I'm sure we're going to pivot here soon into your 5 steps because I do want to get to that. But, one of the things that I think I just want to mention to the men that are watching or listening, or frankly, for women that are watching and listening as well, especially for, the men in your life too, I hope that you share this episode with them, because I think that there's a lot of people in that midlife bubble that could get a lot out of what you are saying here. You're saying some really profound things, Anna. And one of the things that I would say is think as a man, especially when we are in a position where we feel like we need to provide for families, as an example. Maybe we have a spouse or a partner or kids or whoever part of our family, we're providing for. A lot of the times, I think, at least for me and the men I've spoken to, we can get really stuck in this like, yeah, but I do this and I'm successful at it, and I it makes good money and it provides for my family. So like
Yeah.
that's my mission in life. But a lot of the men that I speak to that all that is true for and they have such great intentions are fucking miserable. They're
Mm.
miserable. And I'm not just blaming it on their job. Maybe it's their career, maybe it's not. But there's something that's missing, that there's something inside of them that wants to break free and to be open and
Mm.
adventurous and everything else that they can't feel like they can do either in their job or their marriage or their
Yeah,
partnership,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And what I basically learned through working with guys that some guys are okay and they maybe have the outlet for this kind of rejected, split off part of themselves, like the part that's being kind of hidden in the closet, some closeted part in a way, right?
Well, and
Um,
you mentioned before, how does that usually come out? Like hobbies or volunteer
Some guys,
activities and that sort of thing?
some guys are kind of maybe just coincidental, they were lucky, or somehow they did find a way to keep that side of them going, although they still may be suffering from a split off, right? Like a lot of guys say, well, I feel very split. Like at work, for instance, if I'm in finance, I have to be a certain way, or in corporate. And then I only can be like my real self on holidays or where I go, I don't know, hiking trips or when I do my work in my painting studio, no one should know. So they kind of almost maintain these two personalities, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and that's kind of even not the worst scenario. The scenario I'm dealing with a lot of my clients is that comes the time where they're not just miserable, but they start burning out. They're out of energy. They're running out of energy. They understand in their mind that they still have to provide for the family and they have to show up in the office and that finance pays well or legal or whatever, logistics or whatever they're doing pays well. But the energy is just not there. And they're pushing themselves and they soldier through this because they're responsible guys and they're good guys and they love their families really genuine and they're self-sacrifice and they do it and they do it. But then at some point, and right now it's right epidemics almost like they just can't do it anymore, right? They start getting sick, physically sick, and sometimes they manage kind of hard. They go on sick leave or go on holidays and then spend half of the holidays being sick or whatever. But a lot of times they can't. They just can't get themselves together, and then it starts spiraling down. They're just out of energy. Why? Because they only like almost sourcing energy from half of their personality, and the other half, the ones that actually has the creativity, the emotions, the love, the excitement, the vitality of being alive. It's hidden, right? So he's only like soldiering through with his rational self, so to say, right? And at mid-career, midlife, we just physically we are not young anymore, so we need more energy to go on, right? So we need all the sources we have. And a lot of guys really they force to look for other sources of energy. Otherwise, they just cannot imagine doing another 20 years. It's just literally like prison sentence. The generation of our, let's say, fathers, they didn't have a choice, but the current generation do have a choice of actually pivoting and finding a way to use all of these skills. I mean, we're not saying that you have to downshift and forget about your finance. Why? If you invested 20 years or 18 years, you said, of your career doing finance, you're good at it. So we're talking about adding something else, right? For instance, you said you love coaching, you love people. Hey, it would be a shame not to use your finance skills in coaching, right? Or say,
Yeah,
no, no.
absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, with the coaching that we're doing now, specifically, I'm working with divorced men at this moment, but we're working through other transitions as well. But just because I'm adding that doesn't mean that I'm just like throwing away all my financial coaching that I do. Why would I do that after 18 years? Like I love it. I'm good at it. My clients really enjoy it, and it's just another piece that just gets me even more missional, right? Because for me,
Exactly.
as a midlife man, and I think this happens to probably all of us. I think this happens to women as well. When we get to that midlife and we start looking at like, well, how many days are in front of us versus behind us? At some point, it's like, what am I actually leaving on this earth? Like, what is my
Yeah.
legacy? And by legacy, I don't mean money. A lot of people think of that. I don't mean money. I mean, what is my mission? Like, why am I actually on this earth? And am I actually doing that? Or am I just wasting away my days at this point? When you're 20, you don't give a shit if you're wasting away your days. You want to go waste away your days. And honestly, if you're 20, go waste away your days. Fine. But when you start getting up there, you're just like, oh, like, am I actually living out my mission right now? So
Yeah.
maybe this
Yeah.
is a good pivot to talk about your do what you love 5-step formula. Can we
Yeah.
dig into that? I would love to hear it.
Perfect. Perfect. Because the first step is actually ask yourself why, right? The purpose. I truly believe. I mean, purpose is an overused word, but I couldn't come up
It
with
is.
anything better. Basically, what I'm saying is that when you find the let's say activity, occupation, service, a line of service or whatever that is natural, that purposeful for you, it will be feeding your energy in a natural way, like a flow, right? So it's not about, well, I need to rest and then I need to do work. You will actually enjoy the activity for the sake of activity and then you get paid as well because you produce value. But that's the ideal way to find yourself at mid-career where you can use all the previous baggage, right? To leverage all that, but also unleash the gifts you have as a human being. What are you called to do? Are you called to create? Are you called to help people? Are you called to heal? Are you called to, I don't know, perform or whatever? When you integrate the two rather than keeping, because another thing is a lot of energy is actually wasted on either blocking emotions or suppressing things and hiding the part of yourself, right? A lot of energy is actually consumed by not being your whole self. So at mid-career and midlife, a lot of people, at both men and women, seek becoming whole, integrating all of you. So you can take all of you to the world and serve from that place other than like split off. So I'm helping in the first step, I'm helping people to find that purpose, which I define is the activity or that brings meaning and energy. Energy is number one criteria. When you're energized by it, that's it. If it's not energizing you, and energy feels a thing, it's not in the head. It's not, oh, because it is a good thing to do, right thing to do, but it's in your body. You can't help, but you feel energized and you want to do it, right? So that's a first step. But second
And,
step,
and real quick, before you go on to step 2,
yeah,
I just want everyone that's either listening or watching Anna right now to see her energy. Because it's contagious, Anna.
yeah,
Like, clearly, you talking about this shows me that you're living on mission. So let's just pause for a second for all the listeners. And clearly, like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Even though, you know, you do executive coaching and then you kind of fall into this like midlife man thing and you're like, why am I working with all the... It's clearly evident. Like, you have a lot of really great things to say and you're bringing a tremendous amount of energy. And I can't overestimate what you just said about energy and how extremely important it is. You know, I went to a conference recently and it was amazing and there's lots of energy and everything else. And one of the things that I found that was very consistent with the people that I really wanted to surround myself with, it really all had to do with energy.
mm-hmm.
I honestly didn't really care how financially successful they were. I didn't really care how many businesses they owned. I didn't really care what they looked like. What I really cared about is like, what is the energy flow you said earlier? What is the energy flow that I'm feeling from this person? Because if they're energized and living on mission and being missional with their lives, man, that is who I want to be around. Because if I could just be around energetic people that are living out their mission, it would be amazing. And, you know, sometimes this is really difficult because sometimes this means that you got to drop friends, partners, business partners, whoever, when you get to a level where you're feeling this and they're just not, you know, I mean,
Yep.
I just want to remind everybody of this, and this is maybe overstated, but you will become the 5 people you hang around the most. So look around, write down the 5 people that you're hanging out with and figure out, do they have the energy flow and the mission in their lives that you want to have in yours? Because if they don't, they might not be the best people for you to hang out around with the most. They just might. So step 1, why? Obviously overused, purpose, etc. You have, you know, Start With Why, Simon Sinek, obviously great book, great concept, etc. But completely accurate. So we shouldn't overlook it. So yes, absolutely. What's the mission? What's the why? And then what's you're going to say step 2?
So get on purpose, get on what energizes you. And I have, by the way, developed a methodology that helps people do that and find what really energizes you. But then a lot of men find themselves in the gap where, okay, maybe I feel my purpose is to be creative or help people, but I am right now doing and making money with this, with something else. And they perceive that they do not have the skill set, they don't have the right degrees to do what's on purpose. So they kind of go through this mental loop where they think, well, they kind of feel that off purpose. They kind of know deep down maybe what they want, but they feel they have no right to do it because they don't have the right degree. They don't have the right experience. They don't have the right skill set. So the step 2 is actually what I call it, claim your gifts. Because what I'm saying is that at mid-career, it's a different way of choosing and shifting in your career. And it's not like you've started it. It's not like when you started and you had to go to school and then get a degree and then, you know, get your experience. At mid-career, you already have more than enough. And it's about claiming your real skill set. All of them, by the way, which is also important, not just the professional one, but the personal one. And in your case, you're going through a divorce, although I'm sorry that it happened to you. But at the same time, it also equipped you with the skill set that if you want to work with people, if you want to be a coach, that will be one of the key instruments you will be using, your own experience of going through an emotional loss. You see, without that, you wouldn't be able to do that because you would have no empathy for people.
Absolutely. And I would also have no insight, right? I mean, one of the things that we do with the men that we coach that are going through divorce or pre-divorce, if you are there, send me a message. One of the things that is very easy for me to do is that I went through the process. I went through a very contentious divorce. It was years ago now, so I've already dealt with all the grief cycle and everything else. That's been years over. I also know the red flags. I also know the warning signs. I also know the ways to make sure that you don't lose hundreds of thousands, if not millions of extra dollars, that you don't lose extra time with your kids. But I wouldn't know any of that. Like, let me just give you an example. I had a buddy of mine who went through a divorce a few years before I did. And as empathetic and loving as I tried to be for him, there was only so much that I could relate to because I'd never gone through one. I thought I was in a really happy marriage. I thought everything was fine. So there was only so much of that. And I honestly felt bad about it after I went through my divorce. And I remember I went back to him and I was like, man, I just don't feel like I was there for you. He's like, you were absolutely there for me in the way you could be.
Yeah.
But there's a difference when you go through something. It's part of the reason why this podcast, I think, is so powerful, is that when we're dealing with failures and struggles real time, we can relate to other people that deal with those failures and struggles. Otherwise, if you've never had a failure or a struggle or a divorce or a bankruptcy or a breakup, what are you going to say? I mean, you're going to try to be empathetic, but you're not going to relate to it because you've never been through it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what I found is when the guys kind of thinking or contemplating a career change, they're not really aware of the baggage and and I mean it in a good sense of the skill sets they really possess. They only look at like 3, maybe maximum 5 skill sets they have, like the technical skills and all that. And they abandon a lot of it. So I teach people how to do that. And within weeks, we find like 30, 50 skill sets. It's also, as I say, it's a bit like playing Lego, that game for children. You have to deconstruct first one shape and then claim the little pieces. And then you have to be creative how you can put these little pieces back together again into a new professional working identity that could be on purpose for you, right? But what I found, which is important, I want to give this message.
Sorry. Can you just pause for 1 second? Because I think you said something else really profound in the Lego concept, which I just heard, and that is you have to deconstruct first.
Yeah.
Right? You can't just have all these constructed Legos and then make something new without deconstructing them first and then making something new. And isn't that true in life? Goodness sake. Like my biggest learnings always, who knows, maybe it's just me, but I don't think I'm alone here. My biggest learnings have always been when I've had to deconstruct something. I had to deconstruct my marriage. I had to deconstruct a business partnership. I had to deconstruct a relationship. Whatever it is, where you have to actually be honest enough to just break it down to fundamental levels and then realize like, okay, how do I want to build this back up? And when I build it back up, is it going to look the same as it was before? And the answer with Legos is no, it never. I mean, unless you're following specific instructions. But the idea here is you throw away the instructions and you're like, okay, let's just see what we build now. Right?
Yeah. But that's the scary part,
really
Josh.
But
that's the scary part. That's exactly why people.
For sure, it's scary.
That
Absolutely.
People are
No
afraid
one
of
wants
doing
to change. None of us do.
Especially, remember the blocked emotions, because psychologically, subconsciously, we feel that we have a kind of a shaky construct already, because we're keeping all these pieces kind of, in the shadow. We cannot show this, we cannot show that, and then when men feel, oh my God, now I have to deconstruct all that. What if I will never put myself together again? What if I continue being like this fallen apart Humpty Dumpty kind of thing, right? And that's what I just want to tell your audience, that no, there is a way, but you do have to go through that stage, which is a little bit feeling like falling apart, but it's normal. But then we claim all those skill sets and gifts and experiences and the value. And I actually call them golden nuggets, because this is like your golden reserve, something that cannot be taken away from you, and something that is so valuable because you will mold it into a new identity. And that brings us to the third step, which is about the molding identity. That molding of identity happens before you actually acquire a profession or, occupation. A lot of people say, well, for instance, simple example, I'm a logistics manager, a real one I had, and I want to be a writer. But I say, okay, so you start with saying, I am a writer. I said, I cannot say I'm a writer. I have to write something first. And a lot of people believe they have to first written a novel or better, a bestseller before calling themselves a writer. But the problem is, the paradox is, if you're not a writer, you will never write it, because writer, it takes a writer to write a novel. And that's kind of seems simple, but it's not as simple. You first have to put yourself in the writer identity, and then you have to write, because if your identity of logistics manager will never produce a novel, that's just the reality of it, right? And that triggers the imposter syndrome, because how can I go be a writer if I'm not a writer? Well, I'm saying, well, as long as writer writes, that's all that writers do. They write, right? So as long as you write, you're a writer. Yes,
Yeah, it's true. And you live in, from my experience, you live out the identity you believe you are. So whatever I call myself is the identity I'm going to live out.
yeah, yes, but I but
If I believe it, I mean I mean what I call myself that I actually believe. I don't mean
you
the
do
stuff that
have,
like,
it's almost like I see it the way, like it's almost like there is a room in the house, or the tower in the house, and you have to enter it and have this world view. And it will be a writer's tower, and the next one will be the I don't know, accountant's room. And this will be the podcaster room. But you have to already go into that room and make it your home, and then look out into the world from those eyes. Otherwise, you will never enter there. That's the problem. People think, well, I will become a very successful podcaster, and then I'll announce it to the world. No, man. No. First, you say, I'm a podcaster, and you start recording, and you screw it up, and you screw it up
right.
many times.
Yep,
And
I've done that several times. I
that
mean, go listen to the early episodes versus the episodes now. They're much better now. I had to fuck it up several times before we've tried to figure this out.
That's
So
the
yeah,
essence of human experience. When we're born, we're already human, right? But look at us. I mean, look at the babies. I mean, what is there? I mean, they cannot walk, they cannot talk, they cannot eat, they even cannot poop properly. I'm sorry to say, right? It's just like useless, right? You cannot do anything. And yet we experience them as humans, right? So the same
correct.
here, the same here. So that's the third step. Easier said than done, but you need to shift your identity before you actually go into develop the new career. And it does take a little bit of leap of faith, and it does take an overcoming an imposter, and some, traditional thinking about things. But you cannot become anyone and produce any valuable output until you actually become. If you want to help people, you have to become a coach, right? And not trying. You just have to start doing it. That's it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And that brings us to the next point, which, by the way, Josh, you already covered, and that's about networks. Because a lot of people know that, yes, you are the sum of people you know, and know that, and tell me who your five friends will be the six, right? And also people know that networking is very important for your career. But at mid-career, especially if you're going through mid-career change and you're shifting and you're pivoting, a lot of people using networks in their own way. And what networks actually do, they hold you in the old identity, because a lot of people do two things wrong. First of all, they will turn to their closest friends and their loved ones, and they share their daring dream about becoming someone completely different. Hey, darling, I've been a finance manager for the last 18 whatever years, and that's the guy you married, right? Now I'm thinking of becoming a coach. Boom.
Bad idea. Bad idea.
Yeah,
Bad idea. Trust
exactly.
me. Personal experience. Bad idea. Don't do it. Don't do it, because people don't like change. We don't like change. We want people to kind of be the same, and it's scary for us. So like, if my friend's changing, what does that mean for me? Yeah, bad idea.
Exactly. And the closest friends as well. And it's not because they're bad people, but because they already know
No,
you, who you are. They're part of your system, and they invested in your current identity. So rather than you say,
and they're
hey,
scared, and honestly, they're scared for you. It's the best
of course,
intentions.
of
It's just
course.
like, I just don't want you to fail. I don't want you to get hurt. I like, you're already doing so well at this. Why would you do something different?
Exactly.
It's
That's
best of
what it is.
intentions.
Yeah. So if
Yeah.
you want your new pivot, your new identity killed, do that. It will be killed right away, very effectively, right? A second
Mhm.
thing people do, they like talk to their friends at the cooler, that they all work corporate, but they all have this a dream of having a startup or becoming a startup. So they're having this kind of water cooler chats about the new startup ideas, and then they like have this idea of this startup, and then their buddies say, yeah, it's a great idea. And so the guy feels validated, so he does nothing for the next 22 years, right? So we speak, and he's like 7 years. He's having ideas, and they're all great. How do you know they're great? Well, because the guy at the water cooler, said great. Well, I'm sorry. Any of them have any startup experience? Maybe they're like angel investors. Maybe they're like, sold their. No, no, no. They're just logistics managers like me. Okay, guys. So this is like having this pseudo validation, from the networks who have nothing to do with where you want to potentially go. So there's many other mistakes, but the right thing to do is that you actually, there are details, but this is a short formula. You have to connect to people who belong to the world that you are hoping to enter. Like as a writer, for instance,
Yes.
you have to connect to published
Not that,
authors.
so yeah, so good point, right? You connecting to the people that are from your past, that know your past, are not going to be necessarily the people that will help you connect to your future. That's a really
No,
good point.
more so, they will actually be the people who will be subconsciously reinforcing all your biases against change. And there
Correct.
will be the power of gravity that will be holding you back. So it's not going to be kind of just neutral. No, it will actually work against change. So when you want to
What can
gravitate
I
to
can I just give a quick example of
sure,
this? So a lot of the new business and everything, I really hadn't talked to my parents about for a lot of these reasons. And just recently, I was kind of telling my mom a little bit about what I was doing now and the coaching and the podcast and everything else. And she was like, "But why would you do that?
yeah,
You make good money and you're good at the other thing and
of
everything,
course,
and it was,
yeah,
again, best intention. She loves me. She wants what's best for me, but she literally just couldn't figure out in her mind, like, why would you possibly do that? That's not who you are or who you've
yeah,
been.
yeah. And she might be
There's
even
another,
worried that are you, I mean, maybe as a mother, she needs to tell you, right, not to
for
do
sure,
that because they're
absolutely. She feels like
protective.
it's her. Yeah. There's I don't know if you ever saw the movie Office Space. It's pretty old, but there's a scene in the Office Space that I might add into the show notes. Actually, I'm going to add into the show notes, so go watch it if you guys haven't seen this piece. But so it's all these guys and gals that work in an office, right? And this one guy he's just kind of a nerdy office guy, and he has this dream of building a jump to conclusions mat where you basically just stand and then there's certain conclusions written on the floor and you jump to them. And he tells this story to everybody in the office and they literally all look at him and say, "That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life." And then guess what happened? He ends up getting in this car accident and gets a bunch of money from the car accident and then creates his jump to conclusions mat, and it's successful. It's just such a good picture of like something where, somebody from our past, they say that they're going to do something. And we're like, we just can't figure it out. We're like, that doesn't relate to who we know you are. And it's not that we don't want them to grow. It's just that we can't figure it out. And sometimes I think, frankly, it's because we can't do it ourselves. So if we're not willing to take the risk of whatever we want to do to be on mission or anything else, how could we possibly allow somebody else to do that?
Yeah.
And it's not because we don't love them or support them or care for them. It's
Oh,
just
it's
we
because
don't know
we
how to do it.
love them. It's because we love them and care for
Exactly.
them.
Yeah.
And also, George, don't forget, we talked about that all these guys and all of us often hide that part of ourselves. So the wives, the mothers, the sisters, the brothers, the peers would not be aware that maybe there is a side of you that was dying to be a coach or a creator or a podcaster or writer, someone, not a finance, right? That there was part of you who is miserable and unhappy and bleeding and killing energy or something like that. They often are not aware about that part because it's often hidden. We ourselves, we're not aware of it, right? So there's no
For
surprise. I would
sure.
say, I cannot see you
For
being a
sure.
podcaster. I know you as a finance director, right? Or finance manager. That's
Yeah,
how
for
I
sure.
know you. And that's all.
100%.
And it's not just people from the past, by the way, it's people from our present. Because when we just have to be careful, we just have to protect the dream. And by the way, this jump to conclusion, I liked it because in a way, that's what we do by connecting to people from the future, or let's say from where we want. If we were, let's say, take a writer, you connect to publishers, you connect to published authors. That's important. People who already achieved success in that field that you want to enter. Why is that important? Of course, they will have the connections and all that, and they will give you good advice. But it's not just that. It's you start looking at the world through their eyes, and for them, being a published author is normal. Whereas when you hang out, let's say, with finance directors who's never written a book, or finance guy who's never written a book, it's not normal. They just don't know the world of a published author.
Correct.
They don't
Yeah.
understand how it works. So if you go with them and say, listen, I woke up at 5 and I started writing, they're like, why would you do that, right? Whereas the writer would tell you, God, this is what you do, right? So anyway,
So
correct.
I know our conversation's coming to a close here pretty soon. So let's land the plane with step 5 and then try to, leave a little bit for the listeners. And of course, as always, there's going to be several resources if you're watching in the show notes below. If you're listening, still in the show notes below, we're going to include some things from Anna. Maybe we can include some stuff about the 5 steps if you're okay with that as well, Anna. And so then what's the 5th step? Where do we go
And the
from here?
fifth step, that's my favorite. And that's where men and women are very, very different. That is ask for external help.
Mm,
Should have been the
mm,
first step, really, because and you said it, Josh, correctly. I fully agree with you that somehow women are better for asking about, women are better at asking for help, and somehow we assume that women are allowed to ask for help more and be
right,
vulnerable. And a lot of
right,
men, when they face crisis at work, in career, and they're not happy anymore, and they're burning out, and they want to pivot, but they don't know how, and they're trying, and they're failing. They somehow believe it's all their fault, and they're the ones who have to figure it out on their own. I don't know how it happened, why it happened, but this is what we instilled in our men for generations. And
right,
men believe that if he's strong and he's smart, and they are, and if he's a leader, he has to do it on his own by himself before he tells anyone else. And that's
right,
very wrong. And that's actually what's really costing guys years and years of life, and costing them the success, because this mid career is not forever. It's not forever. I mean, there is a window of opportunity to shift, but once you pass it, I mean, it could be too late. It could be too late I mean, you may still do something, but it won't be another 10, 15-year career, right? So, that's why once the guys, your audience, or say women, notice that their men feel like these symptoms, that they somehow lost the fire in the belly, lost the energy, really looking for mission, can't find it, kind of walking in the dark, or whatever it is, soldiering through the days, feeling miserable, as we say, feeling burning out. You have to seek help. And it's not even okay. It's best if you find the best expert or a coach, but it's not just that. It's just the act of seeking help. It's already the most important thing. Because once you start seeking help, you articulating your problems, and that's already helping. And then you also show commitment that actually you believe that you are entitled, let's say, or you can have a better career. You can have a second act. You can have great productive 20 years of sharing your gifts with the world, and being a happy guy and having a great impact and income in the world, rather than the 20 years of self-sacrifice, suffering, sickness, and burnout. Right?
absolutely. And for the listeners and viewers that maybe they don't like the word help, I'm gonna help for a second here, because I know that sometimes that word is like, I don't need help, I can do it myself, all that. But here's what I would say. Think about it. Also, agree with you, and also, but think about it in a more strategic way as well. Is that what help can also mean? If I'm going out on a missional purpose of doing something, why would I think that the most efficient way of doing that would be to recreate the wheel when the wheel already exists? Why not go find the person that already made the best wheel and learn from them and figure out, how did you make the best wheel? What were the 5 things that you wish you could have avoided? What were the 5 biggest problems that you eventually solved? That's just a more efficient way of creating the wheel, instead of me just starting with a chisel and a hammer and a piece of wood and figuring out, like, I don't know how to make a
Yeah.
wheel. Like,
Yeah.
why would we do that? Now, that being said, I know for myself, a lot of that just has to come from personal experience, from failures, from struggles, which is the whole reason for this podcast. I get that, but why not get a leg up, right?
Yeah.
If you want to coach people, go talk to coaches. If you want a podcast, go talk to podcasters.
100%. 100%.
Right?
Yeah. And actually, when you actually go out and ask for it, as I say, even if you make mistakes and you don't hit like the jackpot right, and you have to be, redirected to another person or another coach or whatever. Still, the fact that you ask for help, it means you're over denial. It means you're taking yourself seriously. You think you can have a better career, and all of that already is a beginning of your change process. That's very important. You got out of your head, where we are all get stuck is in the head, and you got out into the real world. And the words came out of your mouth because that's the only way how you could, or at least you've written something. The words got out of your system, which said, I want to have a better life, better career experience. And that's what matters most of all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anna, thank you so much for being here. This has been a really good, I know we went through a lot of different topics that we weren't necessarily planning on talking about, and we spent a lot of time on just emotions and vulnerability and the state of manhood and, specifically focusing on midlife changes, shifts, etc. I think that your 5-step formula makes a lot of sense. I think it's very logical. I think it is a great guide. So as always, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. And for all the listeners and viewers, all of Anna's information will be in the show notes. So please reach out to her. Please look at the resources that we have here. And, most importantly, as I always say on here, of course, please subscribe to the podcast. Please like the episode. It really helps us grow. It helps us get more men specifically in this community, because there's guys out there that need this. So again, if you listen to this and you are thinking of a guy that's going through this, send it to him, please. This might be the transition that changes their life. And I don't mean that in some sort of egotistical way. I just mean sometimes we just need a little shift to realize oh, that's how I start living on mission. Yeah. And this could be it. So don't be shy. Send it to them and say, hey, I really think that this would be worth your time to listen to. So again, all of Anna's information is going to be in the show notes. Please look at it. Please share this with somebody that's helpful. But again, Anna, thank you so much for being here. It's really, really insightful. You've been great.
Thank you for having me, Josh. I just want to say that I so like that you asked guys to share, because this is actually the group of men, 35, 55 years, mid-career, midlife men, actually one of the highest demographics for suicide, believe it or not. Because that's the exact reason, because the guys are scared to ask for help. They think they're beyond help. And by the way, on my resource will be shared. There's free masterclass. You don't even have to talk to me or reach out to me. You just click the thing and you watch the 45 free workshop where I explain the 5 steps. I explain what to do. And if you then think, yeah, that's me, I want help, then you can actually book a free call as well. So I'm just saying, don't suffer. Don't suffer. The world needs you. The world needs men with all the gifts, everything you want to share. So don't suffer. And reach out, and hopefully in your group as well, the guys will help each other, to have an amazing second act and third act after that, right?
Thank you so much, Anna. And
thank you for having me on the show.
Especially people, like you said, that are struggling to. You have 2 people right now that are telling you to reach out to us. So reach out to us, please.
Sure.
Please. All right. So again, thank you, everyone. We will see you later, you derelict.